variables practice. At the conclusion of this, you will be able to write programs that use variables and expressions with the support of some sample code. You'll be able to debug programs that use variables and expressions. First off, debugging. In order to be able to fix a program, you've got to be able to debug it. The process of finding and fixing problems in code is called debugging. The first thing that you have to be able to do is to describe the problem that you're having. What do you expect the program to do? What does it actually do? And does it always happen that way? You've got to look at it, and you have to think about what is it supposed to do. Then you're going to hunt for bugs. Are there warnings or errors? Anything that says there's something a little wrong, doesn't understand something, sometimes it'll actually tell you that before it runs. What is something that you changed most recently? Did it not work before and after at the same time? What is it? Explain your code to someone else. Walk through step by step. Look for code related to the problem. Okay? If it's a numerical problem, it's certainly not going to be when it says hello in your name. So look for code related to the problem. Try solutions. Make a small change. And by the way, anytime you make a change, comment your change. Put a double slash, say what change you're making and why, and then make the change. That way you can undo the change if it doesn't help or if it makes the problem worse. Document as you go. What have you learned? What strategies did you use? What questions do you have? What fixed it? Debugging, it's one of the toughest things to do in programming. Specific debugging skills for this particular thing, for doing the app and the programs. First off, right over here, slow down the code with the speed slider. You can watch it pop through each thing one at a time, and you can go a whole lot slower. You can see it come out here. Use the console.log to get output. If you want it, if you're wondering what's happening to this number, it's not coming out what I think it should be, do console.log, output it after each thing that's supposed to happen to it. See where it stops being what you expect. So use console.log to get output. You could also use watchers to see your variables as they change. And by slowing down the speed slider, you can watch to see which line of code is executing when. And in watching down here, you can see what the value of your variable is. Now, in this particular lesson, Unit 4, Lesson 3, it's an activity. You've got lots of things that you're going to be doing. You're going to be writing some code with the help of sample code. And it's going to step you through one small step at a time. Okay? You will create variables once at the top, outside of the functions or on events. When you create variables, you should use var only once. You don't need to create variables twice, as this can cause errors. If you create a variable and later on you create it again, that can cause errors. You could have a global as well as a local. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you got to be careful. Only create something once. Don't have two different variables with the same name. Create your variables at the top of your program. This keeps your code organized and easier to read for you and others. Create your variables outside any function or on event. This way they can be used in all of them. If you create a variable inside a function or inside an on event, it only exists while that function or that on event is running. As soon as that function or on event ends, the variable disappears. So be careful. That's another thing that can go wrong. Global versus local. There's two types of variables, global and local. And so far we've only used global variables. Here's the main difference between global and local variables, and right now you should just be using global. Global variables are permanent. They can be used anywhere in your code. var used outside of an on event. So here, var clicks, on event, okay? Clicks is set to 0. On event can use the clicks. Somebody else can use clicks too. It's out here. Local, that's temporary. It can be used only in the part of the code where it was created, like inside of an on event. It is deleted once the on event is done running. So you have to be careful. Here in the global, you created clicks, set it to 0. On event, you incremented the clicks to 1. Well, if inside of on event, I had clicks is set to 1, as soon as I leave on event, clicks doesn't exist anymore, so I can't check it. So local variables are temporary. They exist only when that function or event is running. Global are permanent. They exist from the time the program starts or the app starts until it ends. Avoiding local variables and debugging. Local variables will eventually be useful, and they can be very useful, but later. For now, they're most likely to just be confusing. The biggest issue you'll run into right now with local variables is accidentally using var inside an on event or function. Here's what the code usually looks like. Var count is set to 0. Then inside your on event, you say var count is set to count plus 1. This code is pretty confusing. While it looks like there's only one variable being used, it actually has two variables, one local and one global, and they're both named count. Changing the value on one will have no impact on the other. This can cause unexpected behavior in your code, and it can be tricky to debug. The best way to avoid these issues is to make sure, for now, that you're not using var inside an on event or function. If you run into a tricky debugging problem, check if you're accidentally creating a local variable. Okay, so if you do this and then you come out here and you display count, you're going to get 0, not 1. Not to mention this var count, it's always going to set the count back to count plus 1. Okay, and this count doesn't see this guy, so it's very confusing. Don't use local variables right now. Variables in practice. Okay, you're going to start here, lesson 3, variables practice, level 2. You're going to go to Code Studio, Unit 4, Lesson 3, Level 2. You will complete levels 2 through 11. Okay, at first you're going to run the program. You're going to watch the variables change values in the watch area. When it says discuss with a partner, if you have a friend in class and you would like to discuss with somebody, you most certainly may. Okay, I encourage that. But it's also, if you're doing this asynchronously at home all by yourself, you missed class, whatever, or if it's an asynchronous day, this can be difficult to do. So you might want to jot it down, etc. Think about it, things like that, as opposed to discussing it. You're going to change the number assigned to my favorite number and the string assigned to my favorite food and run the program again. So this way, if you could put pasta instead of pizza, your favorite number, put in whatever your favorite number is, and run it again. The idea is that you're getting used to changing things and what code looks like. Now, when you finish this up, we'll be moving on to Lesson 4, making variables. So this should give you a lot of practice with variables, debugging variables, changing them, looking at the code. Right? See you next time.